So we're starting off this edition of the SportsMax Zone discussing football, a story we had teased a couple of days ago. Massive news coming out of the Wren Nephew Jamaica Premier League as 2023 champions and current league leaders, Mount Pleasant, are facing a possible 15-point deduction due to the alleged use of ineligible players. Reigning champions Cavalier formally filed a complaint against the St. Anne-based club, claiming that 3 of their most recent acquisitions were made after the end of the January transfer window. The players, all Haitian, Clifford Thomas, Exilus Angelo and Jody Johnson, at least 2 of the players have featured in Mount Pleasant's last 6 JPL matches. Now, the complaint also alleges that the players represented Haitian club Real Hope after signing for Mount Pleasant, which is a breach of FIFA Article 5.2 prohibiting simultaneous registration, and that Mount Pleasant listed 7 foreign players, 1 more than the 6 allowed for their April 10 clash with Racing United. We reached out to the chairman of the Jamaica Football Federation's Competitions Committee, Gregory Daly, as well as Mount Pleasant Sporting Director Paul Christie, but both unable to make it for an interview. So this is a massive story coming on the eve of the end of the regular season, and we are awaiting a ruling, which we aren't sure when it's going to come. We understand there were locked-in meetings last night as well, but I think everyone is waiting to see what happens here, because if the points are deducted, it means that a lot of the placings which we are now seeing as authentic could be changed or would be changed.
Yeah, and I can understand, Lance and Ricardo, why everybody is sitting and waiting, because one of the things about the JPL competition is, if you look at the points table, always very so close, right? So one particular match, a couple of points usually separate those making it into the playoffs from those being relegated. And that has gone on for quite some time. So we already know the importance of these points. Now, I think what a lot of the teams will be looking at, they would want to see, one, how this matter is being dealt with, how many points, if any at all, that Mount Pleasant will be deducted, and of course, just what it means for various clubs. I mean, one of the things I tend to say is when things happen like this, you look at previous instances, if it would have happened before, and then you decide, well, what sort of ruling you'll make. But, Ricardo, you made a comment at the top of the show where you said, if anything happens, and, many people who are looking on from the outside might be a bit surprised, because you're looking at the facts, well, the information that were presented by Cavalier. And of course, that 16-page document has all the team sheets. It's so detailed, as to when these players played, the timing of that transfer window and all these different things. So I probably asked you to tell me a bit about that comment that you made,
before I get into that, an important point that I thought Lance brought up in terms of the repercussions the possible decision will have on the Jamaica Premier League, because as it is now, Mount Pleasant lead the standings. They have 90 points, 1 round remaining in the regular season that is set for Sunday. Now, if it is that Mount Pleasant lose those 15 points, then they would drop to 3rd on 75 points.
Yeah.
But even more significantly for me, it would mean that Racing United, who are currently out of playoff contention, would move to 54 points, and they would be back in playoff contention, which is significant. So you would go into the final day with 3 teams in with a shot of getting that 6th and final position to go through to the playoffs. So it is important that the decision is made within the next 24 to 48 hours, and the understanding is that it will be from the JFF Competitions Committee, but it has to be, because the teams have to know what they're dealing with going into the final round of matches, which at this stage is set for Sunday.
Yes.
So that is now just understanding the significance of what is happening here.
Yeah, one of the factors that we've got to consider as well, you looked out on the playoff situation, but the relegation position is also up for grabs, because I think Chapelton could be one of the teams benefiting from any shifting of the points.
Yeah.
And they're just 1 point above the drop zone at the moment. So if the points are deducted, then things would look more favorable for Chapelton to avoid the drop.
Yeah, very much the case. Looking, though, at the specifics of this case, Lance and Mariah, to be honest, I'm extremely intrigued by it all. And I've learned quite a bit about the transfer market in football and transfer deadlines and all of that over the last 12 hours in trying to understand what is going on in this situation. So there are 3 alleged breaches. The third one I will deal with first because that seems the easiest one for me, at least.
Because that's a JPL ruling.
Because that's a JPL ruling, and that is that Mount Pleasant used more than the 6 allowed foreign players in a particular game. Now, the limit is 6. 6 players did not actually take the field,
they were on the match
but
card.
more than 6 players were on the match card.
Including the St. Lucian Melvin Doxley.
There you go.
Yeah.
And the first question I'm asking Lance and Mariah, how does that constitute a breach? If the players didn't actually take the field, if they didn't actually play in the game, then how do you consider that to be a breach of the rules? Does being named on the match card in and of itself
a breach
constitute a breach?
Well, if Cavalier is putting that in as a breach, then they may have information that it is a breach, whether the players played or not. If it is that you're only allowed 6 and you put 7 on the match card, then
it shows that you have intention to play 7.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying maybe the rules are clear enough to suggest that you cannot put 7 players on the match card, whether they play or not. And Cavalier's document is so detailed and very specific that it does appear to me as if they wouldn't have included that if they didn't have the requisite information to suggest that it is a breach. But that was just the easiest of Chapo's
problems. So that's breach number 3. Let's go to problem number 2.
I'm looking at the rule here, right?
Yeah.
And maybe this will help. So this says a maximum of 6 players of foreign nationality, players not holding a valid Jamaican passport and or birth certificate, including players eligible to play under CARICOM rules, may be registered for each club. All 6 players may be on the field at any given time.
And it ends there?
Another part of it says a maximum of, a player will be allowed a maximum of 6 in and out registration for the entire season. I'm not sure that pertains specifically to this.
Yeah.
The first part of that says each club is required to submit a list of a maximum of 35 players, of which a minimum of 8 shall be born on or after the 1st of January 2023. That's not speaking to the foreign players. Only 27 players should be over that age. If a club cannot field 8 players born after January 1st, yeah. So that speaks to some age requirements. But in terms of the foreign players, you are allowed to register 6. Now, if it is that more than 6 ended up on the match card, right? How were they allowed to register more than 6? That goes through the JFF competitions committee, doesn't it?
Yes.
So how do you approve more than 6 players being registered? And I am still making the point that even if you register more than 6, unless you have more than 6 taking the field, then it should not constitute a breach in my opinion.
Because they didn't play, they didn't impact the game in any way, unless being on the card was like a lot of support where they got them to win. Because I can't even think what other way they would impact the game.
Yeah. In any case, that particular breach only relates to one match, and that was the Racing United game on the 10th.
All right, let's get to the bigger ones now.
Of April. As it relates to the transfer issues now, so again, the fact is these players were duly registered to play for Mount Pleasant in the Jamaica Premier League. That is a fact. They received their IDs, and the rules, as put forward by the JFF Competitions Committee, are clear that once you have gone through the process and you have received your IDs, then you are duly registered to play for Mount Pleasant. So I'm not even going to go into the nitty-gritty of the allegations in terms of when they were transferred and might be beyond the deadline and whatever the case might be, because the fact is this all went through the JFF and FIFA to get them cleared to be able to compete. So that's one aspect. The real problem is, though, that seemingly, having been contracted to Mount Pleasant, two of these players at least represented what should have been their former club, Real Hope, before they got to Jamaica. And that's where the real problem is. Again, though, my thing is, if that is the case, then this should be a matter for CONCACAF and Real Hope. Because when they played for Mount Pleasant, they were duly registered.
They were legitimate.
They were legitimate Mount Pleasant players.
So
when
the infraction,
they played for Real Hope, they were not legitimate Real Hope players.
Yeah.
So the infraction should be on the part of the player specifically and Real Hope. And I think those are issues that should be taken up by CONCACAF, who is in charge of the Caribbean Cup competition.
Yeah, wow. So this is actually a lot deeper than we
And that's
expected.
the simplest way I can put it at this stage. I know there's somebody out there probably saying right now, there has to be more to this, there has to be something deeper. And maybe on another day we can look into the specifics because they're all there. But essentially, that's where I am at with what has happened in this case.
So, Ricardo, based on your understanding of the situation, because all three of us will have different understandings, right? You can read the same document and get a whole different view of it. Do you think Mount Pleasant appears safe then?
In my opinion, yes. In my opinion, I would be surprised if there is a significant sanction for Mount Pleasant.
And 15 points is a lot, eh?
It is a lot, but if you deserve to lose it, you should lose it. I'm just not convinced, based on what I've seen and from my understanding of what has taken place, that they deserve to lose those 15 points or to lose any points at all in this particular case.
There was a story surfacing today which would have to confirm about a shake-up in the Mount Pleasant administrative staff. Which, if it is true, it would suggest to me that as a club they have accepted some level of the discrepancy. But that story is yet to be confirmed. But there was a story surfacing today that Mount Pleasant is shaking up its administrative...
Well, you have to be careful how you get news out of Mount Pleasant because, you know, 1 minute a coach is not there and the next minute they are. So you have to be very careful. Things can happen very quickly down at that place. Yeah. And so, yeah, you have to be really, really careful with the way you run with the news that comes from down in St. Anne.
But I don't feel there'll be... Right now, the attention should be on this turnaround versus a shake-up. I don't feel, unless one triggered the other.
Well, listen, my understanding coming out of that Mount Pleasant camp is that they are fully focused on preparing for the playoffs. So I take that to mean that they expect to be very much safe at the end of this investigation and when the final decision comes out. They don't seem worried from what my information tells me. And from everything I am seeing here, unless there is something I am not understanding clearly, then I think they appear safe as well going forward. But as we said at the top of the show, it's important that the decision comes quickly because it has significant implications for what happens going forward in the JPL and certainly how the teams approach that final round that's set for Sunday, because it would mean that the relegation battle looks slightly different. The playoff battle for that sixth and final spot would look slightly different as well.
Yeah. One of the things that we've got to consider as well, though, is how long they're taking to make the decision or to make the ruling. Because whereas in certain aspects of it, as you would have just outlined, it appears as if Mount Pleasant could be safe, then if it is as straightforward as that, I don't think it should take that long for them to make a ruling.
Yeah.
So the fact that the ruling, after several hours of meetings and now a day later, we are still not in receipt of a ruling from the competitions committee of the JPL, then it makes me wonder just how straightforward this might be and what the ruling may be.
Yeah, well, it's almost 5 o'clock Jamaica time now, 6 o'clock ECT. I was fully expecting that a ruling would come by about 3 o'clock today.
That's right.
And it hasn't, but I still expect that it may come later today or early tomorrow. Because also, sometimes with these things as well, you may make a decision, but then to put that decision on paper and to make a release so it can be clear for everybody can take some time, and you have to sometimes go through a number of individuals who have to look it over and over and make the final approval. So let's see. Let's see.
Yeah, well, we wait.
I'm intrigued, though. I'm intrigued.
Yeah, this is a huge story, and as we said, it comes, on the doorstep of the end of the regular season, which decides so many things. The top two automatic semi-final qualifiers, which at the moment would be in jeopardy for Mount Pleasant, even though they were so safe going in, and as we said, the playoff spot and the relegation spots as well. So we anxiously await this ruling from the Jamaica Premier League's competitions committee, and we go to break because we have a lot more to come on the SportsMax Zone today.